Every generation brings its fair share of leaders. Leaders who inspire, leaders who motivate, and leaders who elevate. The military strongman from Guinea Conakry, Mamadi Doumbouya, at the 78th UN General Assembly meeting has gotten everyone's attention. People all over the world are still raving about it. Some even went as far as calling it the best speech ever made at the UN. That might be a stretch.
A coup epidemic in Africa. Following the COVID-19 pandemic, the continent has been hit by an epidemic of military putsches, particularly in the French-speaking countries south of the Sahara. Everyone condemns them, sanctions them, is disturbed by the sudden resurgence of this phenomenon that we had thought was a thing of the past, and rightly so. But what I wish to say is that the international community must have the honesty and the rectitude to not content itself simply with denouncing the consequences. Rather, it must look to and address the causes. Coups d'etat have multiplied in Africa in recent years because there are deep-rooted reasons for this. And to remedy the problem, ladies and gentlemen, we must look at these root causes. The putschist is not only the person who takes up arms to overthrow a regime. I want us all to be well aware of the fact that the real putschists, the most numerous, and those who avoid any condemnation, are also those who plot and scheme, who use trickery, who cheat to manipulate the text of the Constitution in order to stay in power eternally. It is those in white-collar jobs who change the rules of the game as the game unfolds in order to keep the reins of power in their hands. These are the most numerous kinds of putschists. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I am one of those who one day decided to shoulder our responsibility to prevent our country from slipping into complete chaos, into an insurrection. No political forces at the time had the courage nor the means to put an end to the duplicity that we were experiencing, as they were all completely neutralized back then. The institutional correction for which my brothers in arms and I took responsibility on September 5th, 2021, was only a consequence of that chaotic situation which had ended up tearing apart the social fabric of my country and undermining our coexistence. This is not an exhaustive list, but we believe that the transitions underway in Africa are due to several factors, including broken promises, the lethargy of the people, and leaders tampering with constitutions with the sole concern of remaining in power to the detriment of collective well-being. Today, the African people are more awake than ever and more than ever determined to take their destiny into their own hands. The unequal distribution of wealth creates endless inequalities, famine, and abject poverty, which make the daily lives of our populations increasingly difficult. These inequalities are part of the causes for the events that endanger our peaceful coexistence above all. When the wealth of a country is in the hands of an elite, while newborns die in hospitals due to a lack of incubators, it is not surprising that in such conditions we are seeing transitions in order to respond to the profound aspirations of the people.
In highlighting how Western democracy has failed in Africa, Colonel Doumbouya pointed out that it only facilitates the corruption of elites and the plunder of the continent's resources. He also said African leaders hailed as democratic are often those who kowtow to Western powers and are willing to sell off their resources to these powerful nations. The Guinean leader concluded by saying it is time for the West to stop lecturing Africans and treating us with condescension like children.
Africa, ladies and gentlemen, is suffering from a governance model that has been imposed on it. A model that is certainly good and effective for the West, which developed it over the course of its history, but which is difficult to incorporate and adapt to our realities, our customs, and our environment. Alas, I have to say that the graft did not take. I know that when I say this, many will immediately say to themselves, oh, another warmonger who wants to wring the neck of democracy, or another soldier who wants to impose his dictatorship. However, I want to say very clearly, without hypocrisy, without pretense, eye to eye, we're all aware that this democratic model that you have so insidiously, skillfully imposed on us after the La Baule summit in France, something you've been imposing almost religiously. This model does not work. Various economic and social indices demonstrate this plain and clear. This is not a value judgment on democracy itself. Believe me, this is just taking stock of the situation. It's a balance sheet. Over several decades of chaotic experimentation with this model in our environment, we can make this observation. This was a period full of nothing but political games. And this, of course, has been to the detriment of what is essential, namely the economy and the local processing of our natural resources. Allow me to take this truth exercise a little further. Through my short but very intense experience of managing a state, Guinea, I have come to better understand the extent to which this model has, above all, contributed to maintaining a system of exploitation and plunder of our resources by others, and a rampant corruption of our elites. National leaders who have often been granted democratic labels based on their acquiescence or their capacity for selling off the resources and the property of their people, or perhaps their ease in giving in to the pseudo recommendations and injunctions of the great powers. I must confess in this regard that everything that I am facing was beyond all imagination. These are the same people who profess democracy, transparency, who denounce poor governance and corruption, who dictate the rules. It is they who, behind the scenes, very discreetly and underhandedly, are increasing pressure to make us cede our national wealth through unconscionable leonine contracts. I understand certain leaders and some of my predecessors who, because they possessed certain weaknesses, because they were under pressure, or because they had skeletons in their closets, or particularly because they had a political agenda, gave in to what was being asked of them. I understand them, even if I do not approve. In some cases, I was even reminded that if I had a political agenda, I would be less comfortable carrying out the reforms that my government and I are tackling. One thing is certain. We have but one concern, and that is the well-being of the people and living together. It is time to take our rights into account and to let us take our proper place. But also, and above all, it is time to stop lecturing us and to stop treating us with condescension like children. Rest assured that we're old enough to know what is good for us.
Colonel